Hi Chris, how are you?
Good morning, Rod. I'm well, and it is the first day of December, which for those that celebrate is the start of Advent. So much Advent calendar action in my house as my kids still, I think, expect an Advent calendar as they are 13 and 11.
Yeah, that mine expected something posted to them this year apparently to get their Advent calendars in. It was a bigger thing when they were small. I was never that bothered about it. When I wasn't eating chocolate, because I'm a bit weird for a couple of years there, they really had to struggle to find me something and I wasn't bothered. But it was nice to get fudge in the morning, or I think the most interesting one was gin every morning. That was not that I drank it in the morning, I saved it to the evening, but that was a good one.
Yeah, they're quite the thing. We've done the gin ones, we've done cheese ones, we've done chocolate ones. My wife last year just had a shoebox and she just put something in it every day for me in essence, which was kind of cool, but it's a lot of work. But both of us are trying to be good, so we haven't bothered with Advent this year and the kids obviously have.
Fair enough. Should we crack on and do a show?
We will. So it's episode 149. It's the 1st of December and the weather's been interesting. I'm going to go, we've had cold, we've had quite mild, and we're probably just damp now.
Yeah, we've had some horrendous rain, I must say. But anyway, let's get on with it, because I know you've got a time constraint this morning. So
I do.
Let's get this done. A very quick follow-up with me. Last year I reported on buying some Meros Matter plugs after your recommendation. Could not make them work. In fact, I don't even know where they are anymore. I may have thrown them away. They've become part of the great e-waste pile in the sky. However, I thought I'd have another go. And I was on the Amazon Black Friday thing, which was probably a very quick talk about. And I bought these 8-tree, which is a brand I've never heard of, some knockoff Chinese brand or something. Smart plugs, which come with just a barcode on them. I plugged it in, a light flashed for a little bit. You need Bluetooth activated on your phone. I scanned it in HomeKit. HomeKit recognized it in about 15 seconds, and it works. Done.
Yeah, I'm a little bit jealous here because they just seem to have worked for you. I feel bad, obviously, that I recommended the Meros ones and they didn't work for you. Mine are all working now. Because I choose the Meros app to add them, public service announcement, don't do it in a home app, which is odd because they all say HomeKit on them, they're HomeKit plugs, but yet you have to do it in the other app. And I think that's confusing. But I'm glad yours working. I've not heard of 8-tree either. I must confess, I've actually grabbed a couple of my old plugs, my Eve Home ones, to plug in for the Christmas trees and outdoor lights. So I've got a couple of spares that I just get out every year, and then in home I set up a scene called Crimbo, and you can turn Crimbo on and off, and it just puts on all the Christmas lights, because now my kids have got iPhones, they like to turn that stuff on when they get home from school and stuff, so it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think it's a useful thing. If you're in the sort of smart home ecosystem, things that work in home and others work fine. I've got an app, website, intranet site called Home Assistant, where I can script a lot of this stuff as well if I want to. It means you could do something like have an old Raspberry Pi with a screen or something and have that in a central location in the house, or have it as apps on people's phones and control all of those things that aren't controllable in HomeKit. And I don't blame you for the Meros thing. I have pre-existing Meros things, so it should have worked anyway.
Yeah, that is odd. What is interesting though with home, just a very quick sidebar, is because my kids are 12 and 13, as we said at the top of the show, it's quite interesting when they come home from school now, they can put the heating on, they can turn on all the Christmas lights, and it's quite nice that it's given them that ability, I think, just to have access to things that, like, you normally as a kid, I never used to touch the heating or get involved with it because I'd always get told off putting the dial in the wrong place, but they can just go boom, pop it on because it's all in the home app. I think that is kind of cool.
Yeah, of course they could have just flicked the plug once upon a time before, but we won't go through that. Should we do some stories?
Yeah, let's go into it.
So we got a little bit of follow-up, and as always, we struggle a little bit of time between follow-up and what is the main show. But I think all these ongoing attacks at NHS hospitals are awful. They're obviously getting worse. I think people who would dare attack a children's hospital is particularly reprehensible, but this is a story in the Register. This is the second attack on an English NHS org this week. So up in the Wirral, Alderhay Hospital is currently has an attack going on. I think this is terrible.
Yeah, no, it's awful. I did read this one through. A big part of my day job is cybersecurity, so I always read these with two interests, the personal piece and the corporate piece. But there's been ongoing attack. The hackers have leaked some details of basically proving that we've got the data. Obviously, there's going to be a call for a ransom payment. It's horrible, isn't it? Like you say, people going after children's hospitals. Like, come on. I'm sorry. I just can't believe it. But some of the stuff, the data they've got is about donors and, their personal details and how much money they give in and that kind of thing. It's just, I don't know. I just can't believe it.
It's absolutely reprehensible. I mean, the people are trying to look after children here. The last thing they want is their systems being affected and having potentially personal details leaked online. But this is the world in which we live.
You've skipped the whole of follow-up and gone straight into news.
Oh, have I? Well, that's all right. That's no big deal.
We can circle back. It kind of is follow-up because we're always talking about ransomware and attackers. So it's a tricky one to gauge.
I'll just move the link in the show notes.
There you go. The magic of editing. But it is pretty bad, isn't it? But it does show, though, that a lot of companies where they've either underinvested or don't keep up, you're culpable. You could get an attack like this, and once they're in, you then end up spending all the money that you've saved on not patching, not updating, not employing people to monitor. You blow that money so quickly that keeping them out has got to be the best way to go. Yeah,
difficult. Something else that might be difficult if you live in Australia. I'm getting all my stories wrong this morning.
So something else. If you live in Australia and if you had I'm reading.
We're not doing well this morning. It's obviously that Sunday has struck us. Sorry, listeners and viewers. So something else.
I think it's my fault, isn't it? Because I said let's record early because I've got to go out. So something else then. Where are we going, Rod?
We're doing Australia. Australia has banned social media for the under-16s, which I think we talked about before in news that this was a potential thing Australia was going to do. They voted it into law last week. And if you're under the age of 16, new law is scheduled to come into effect in 12 months. There's a little bit of time, giving social media companies time to meet the requirements. These include taking reasonable steps to prevent children who have not reached minimum age from having accounts. So, great. How are they going to enforce it?
I think this is the tricky one, isn't it? Because I think Snapchat here, you have to be over 13 or something, but lots of children are on it and they're well under 13. It's going to be interesting, isn't it? How are they going to enforce it? I kind of like the idea, but I'm not sure about it, if you know what I mean. I'm not a big social media person, as we've talked about, and I've got children, but you don't want them to be behind the rest of the world, do you? And I think it's a really tricky one. In some ways, you want it to be maybe phased, that you can do some social media and it tears up as you get older, maybe. But 16 is quite old in one way, I think, because kids are maturing a lot quicker these days than what we were. What do you think about this?
I think I quite like the intent that, you're trying to let kids be kids, not get cyberbullied, all that stuff. But this horse has bolted. The stable door's been open for a very long time. Kids are involved. They're involved with TikTok. What does social media mean? In this case, is it YouTube? Is it messaging on YouTube? Is it messaging on Reddit or something like that? Or do the Australian government just mean TikTok or Instagram or one of those that there's actually sort of influences on part of? So I think this could be quite a blurry line, really.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. Like I say, as a parent with kids in this demographic, I think if I took it off them now, that would be a problem for them. I've got two kids, very different. And it's interesting to see how they use it. One kid just texts his mates, and the other one's trying to watch the whole of YouTube. So very mixed, I think, on their usage there. But hopefully they see myself and my wife, though, and we pick up our phones, we message our friends for a bit of social interaction, and then we put our phone back in our pocket, and we get back on enjoying whatever we're doing. So yeah, I'm mixed on this one. Curious to see how it goes. And in the UK, there is a TV show about a school where children are giving up their iPhone or their media devices for a month, and they want kids to go back, to be more probably how our childhoods were, where they're a bit more engaged with the world around them. And I'm curious to watch a bit of that with my children, just to see what they make of it and whether they could exist in that world.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see how it goes. It'll be interesting to see how it's enforced. Another thing of interest is that the story I accidentally queued up first is that Reddit has now overtaken X/Twitter in popularity as the dominant social media platform in the UK. Which again, I think I found quite interesting. After all our discussions of Reddit last year about how users were fleeing it and moderators were leaving, then, well done Reddit for actually managing to get into this position. Yeah,
it does feel like Reddit have come away from all that hoo-ha last year, and they've just carried on plugging away in the background. I'm not a big Reddit user myself, but it does come up from time to time in search results when I'm looking for something for help on a question, such as how do I get Roblox to play for my 11-year-old son on a PlayStation. It didn't have the answer I was looking for, but it came up a lot in the search results. So I'm not surprised by this, and it does feel like X has continued to drop. It had the big spate early on when Elon bought it, and obviously following Trump's election, it feels like they are just shedding people hand over fist at the moment.
Yeah, and as we talked about last week with Blue Sky, that seems to be continuing. There's an awful lot of users on Blue Sky I'm recognizing from the old Twitter days that have actually finally moved over. And the key demographic has been journalists. Journalists who like to talk a lot and feel they've got an audience, they're beginning to move as well.
Yeah, I'm interested to see. I'm going to watch the Formula One later, and if they put anything else other than their X handles on, because sometimes they flash up on the screen when they're talking. It'll be interesting to see if they start mentioning other social media.
Well, just as an experiment when you're watching it, have you got a Blue Sky account yet?
Nope.
Well, get one now and follow the hashtag. Look for the hashtag, I presume it's #F1, and just watch the chat.
This sounds a very social media thing to do.
Well, I think you should, because I did it with Bake Off and Blue Sky, and I was really impressed.
Yeah, maybe I should have done that. Bake Off was quite a challenging watch, but we'll talk about that later.
We will. Let's talk about something else. I mentioned before when we were doing the testing for iOS 18 that I had no RCS between my Android phone and it wasn't appearing as in the options for my iPhone. Well, looks like there's a reason for that. Later this month, UK Carrier 3, which is the prime carrier for the MVNO that I'm on, Smarty, is going to give us RCS on iPhone. So, yay.
Yay. No, I think this is good. It seems odd that they're trailing a little bit here, but I guess they are going through a merger with Vodafone potentially, something where they've slowed down project work, and then I guess the merger hasn't gone through yet, and therefore it's like, oh, actually we do need to do these things. Do they support eSIMs yet? Can you do an eSIM?
I don't think so, no.
I was just curious to see, are they actually getting RCS out? Are they going to get eSIMs out, and have more of a parity with the main carriers?
Well, is it parity? How many users care in the UK? Our iPhones still have SIM card slots. Most users don't care.
For now. But
sure.
There will come a time when Apple take it away, surely?
Maybe, but again, if users are that wedded to their SIM cards, they'll just go to Android phones or some other manufacturer that still has them. So I don't think the carrier particularly cares. It's maybe in their interest to keep them move with the times a little bit.
I think it's more that, moving with the times. I'm probably unique in that my whole family's on eSIMs, in that I've just bitten the bullet and gone with it.
After the experience of moving an eSIM in this household, I never want to see one, frankly. I don't mind them for travelling, but it took over a week. In fact, it might take 9 days to actually get the whole thing moved.
And it's definitely worse when it's your partner that's having the problem, because I've been through some of that pain.
So I got it in the neck, and I'm not a fan. Not a fan, Chris.
No, I can understand that. It can be testing for a very long enduring marriage, can't it? When the SIM card won't move. I've been in the same boat.
I'm going to move very quickly along and talk about Microsoft. We've got a few stories about Microsoft. That's not the story about Microsoft. This is the story about Microsoft. Microsoft taking back it claims it's blown up this week that there's some settings inside a Word and Excel that looks like it's training your user data inside of the files on that. And there's been a whole bunch, I've seen it several times repeated on social media, about how to switch off sending this data to Microsoft for it to go to AI. They are saying that this is not the case. Is vehemently, that's a good word for a Sunday morning, denying the claims. In Microsoft 365 consumer and commercial applications, Microsoft does not use customer data to train large language models without your permission. So they're fairly certain that they're not doing it. But it's interesting how these things arise, isn't it?
Yeah, it is interesting it's blown up like this. How has there been confusion around this? I'm a big Microsoft fan, as we know, in the corporate space, albeit a bit expensive. But it's interesting this is blown up so badly. How did this get misconstrued, or is there actually some truth to this?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes there's no smoke without fire, but I think with all the news stories about every piece of media being trained on whatever content there is out there, I'm not surprised people are a bit nervous about it. And we've already talked before about how there is a certain amount of, let's call it, monitoring inside of Windows 11, certainly on the commercial side of it, for what goes on with users, so they can send analytics back to Microsoft for how it's being used, and that can be construed as watching your users all the time. So it's not much of a leap to go from there to, well, hang on, there's these new LLMs, and I'm hearing that the New York Times is having its stories parsed on OpenAI and the rest of it. Is Microsoft doing that to my documents? I've got very personal things in my documents. I might be older Hay Hospital and worried about what else is going on there. So I don't think it's much of a leap for users to worry about this stuff.
No, that's fair. And obviously, there's been a lot of hoo-ha last year about them training on the open internet and everything out there. And it does feel like AI companies just want to grab as much data as they can ingest as humanly possible. Well, I say as humanly possible, as computationally possible, I guess is the better saying.
Yeah, jam it into your LLM. Another little story. I was listening to Upgrade this week, and Mike and Jason were talking about how Apple had done the Mac right, in the sense that if you didn't want to be part of the App Store, but you did want your app to be trusted, you could give the app to Apple and they would notarize it. Notarizing it is them just checking there's no viruses inside of the deliverable, the package basically that you give to Apple for deployment. And that then you get a cryptographic hash to say that this is the right thing. So when you install software on the Mac, it will go, this is fine, it's been notarized, and I'll let you get on with it, as long as you allow third-party developers the access inside of the settings. When we went to the EU, and when Riley Tesselt went to the EU to talk about AltStore, he was asked, do you trust Apple to notarize iPhone apps in the same way? So Apple would notarize them, they'd get put into these alternative app stores, marketplaces, and then everything would be fine. And then they'd stopped one. They stopped one of the emulators coming through on the AltStore. And he said, I don't trust them anymore. They've done it again. So now Mini VMac, which is a little app that will let you run classic Mac OS inside of an emulator on the iOS store, has been rejected by Apple. And that's a second strike, surely.
It is. I'm mixed on this one just because this is about Mini VMac being rejected, and it is about running Mac on your iPhone, is it not? And therefore, there's a licensing problem there with Apple.
Well, is there? You can run any manner of things in a web browser. You can run classic Mac OS in a web browser. You can run classic Mac OS in an emulator on your computer. Your iPhone is a computer. Your iPad is a computer. Apple aren't gatekeepers at this point. They're just meant to check if there's any security issues with it. I don't think there's a trademark thing.
No, that is the problem, because in the comment, though, it does say about Apple does not license its Mac operating system for use outside of an Apple-branded computer. But you're right, the iPhone is an Apple-branded computer, I guess. And this is where they're conflating notarization with their terms of service, I guess.
I think the EU will be looking at this very, very closely. Because what if there was something... I suspect if they'd put a Linux operating system inside of this, Apple would have done exactly the same thing. They don't want you to be able to run a computer inside of your computer. They're okay with a console, it would seem now, but they're not okay with a computer.
And it's only taken them, I can't do the math, but 20 years to get comfortable. Not 20 years, 15 years to get comfortable with that. So maybe it's another 15 years until this will be allowed to be.
We shall see. Also from Apple this week, they've unveiled the 2024 App Store Awards finalists. We talked about this last year in our end-of-year show when we looked at Too Good To Go, which had been new to me at that point. That was the winner last year. There are many finalists, so I won't go through the list, but suffice it to say, as I scroll, I don't actually recognise that many of the apps in this list.
No, I would concur with that statement. I'm just looking at it as we're talking now. A few of them I recognise, but there's not many of them I actually use, if I'm being honest. I see Bellatro's in there, which I know is you've highlighted it. So I didn't see that. But Bellatro Plus is in there, as they call it on the App Store. I still haven't played it. I've opened it and gone, it looks too complicated for me, and closed it.
It's not that complicated. So yeah, Apple Arcade Game of the Year, Bellatro Plus, Outlanders 2 and Sonic Dream Team. I've played Bellatro Plus. Mac App of the Year, Adobe Lightroom. No, I don't think we should ever be giving Adobe anything at this point. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later as well. I won't go through all of these because there's 45 altogether. It might be for a later show when something wins. There is a Vision Pro Game of the Year finalist. I just thought it would be amusing to point out. Luna, never heard of it. Thrasher, never heard of it. Vacation Simulator. Seems like a good thing to put in a Vision Pro.
Just go on vacation. Why do you need to simulate it?
Anyway, for those that are interested, it's out there. Like I say, 45 things, not worth going through. But it's interesting they're maintaining this, really. I
think they should. I think it's good. It draws, hopefully, light on some apps that you wouldn't normally see. What I'd like to see here is not the big ones, but more indies and stuff like that. Maybe they should have more of an indie section, I think, just to, because it's going to do their business some real good.
Yeah, it's interesting that, two things close to your heart, well, one thing close to your heart. The F1 TV is mentioned as being part of the Apple TV App of the Year, so it must be a particularly good app.
Which I've never used, so maybe I need to go check that out.
You've never used it. And Zoom, for keeping groups connected in innovative ways. I think Zoom's having an interesting moment, but yeah, there you go.
We've got a bit more on that coming up, haven't we?
We do. Do you want to tell us about the Books Palma 2?
Yes, we touched on this before, so I just dropped this into follow-up. There's now a review out for the Palma 2. I'm a little tempted with this, just because it looks like a cool e-reader, and I was a bit annoyed that Kindle haven't really done anything that exciting. But the review's out, it's on The Verge. I just think if anybody's interested in a small Kindle S reader, the review's worth a quick 5-minute read. Basically, it's a great little device. It's massively overpriced at £280, and it's still running some slightly outdated Android OS and not terribly quick. But it looks a cool device. If this came in at about £100, I'd snap one of these up immediately. I think their pricing is just too far away from Apple's Kindle pricing. But I was curious to try an e-reader that isn't Kindle and to work out how I might transport my books around and do things like that.
I don't think that's that difficult. The software called Calibre, whichever way you say it, that will translate your Kindle purchase books into any other format. This is like an Android mobile phone with an e-ink screen, basically, and no SIM card, right?
Correct. I just think it looks cool, and I just fancy playing with one. But as somebody that's trying to jettison devices at the moment, I was, like I say, put off with the 280. It's about £280 in the UK, so it's a lot of money, I think, for what that device is. It's half a Mac Mini.
Yeah, that's quite a lot when you put it like that. I think, yeah. There's Kobo and Kindle exist. But yeah, interesting. It seems to have caught a certain amount of people's attention anyway. I've heard about it a lot.
If they can get it to a better price point, that would be a much bigger hit, I think.
Shall we do some news?
Let's do it.
So, first story, back to Zoom. I've noticed this. We use Zoom corporately at work. Zoom has relaunched itself as an AI-first company without the word video in its name. Yeah, I don't think this is an Apple computer moment for Zoom.
No, it doesn't feel like it. So instead of being Zoom Video Communications Inc., it's now going to be Zoom Communications Inc. I don't get why they didn't just call it Zoom Inc. Much better name, surely.
Surely Zoomications is right there.
Zoomications. Maybe. I'm not so sure about that. So they're
Comzoomication?
Just Zoom Inc. Apple showed you the way. Just do it. Just shorten it. Nice and simple. So they're reinventing Zoom to be more of a competitor with like G Suite and Teams Suite, I guess, and to be more of a corporate platform. So as a user of Zoom products, I am not. But how are you finding this? Have you noticed any real difference? Me on the outside, I did not know this was a thing.
Well, the most obvious thing was the AI companion button that appeared slap bang in the middle of the app. It wants you to start transcribing your calls. It wants to offer whiteboarding. It wants to offer bits and pieces. And I have noticed it because almost every member of my team and around the university has gone, "How do I switch this off?" So
how can I just have normal Zoom back? Because that is the thing. Zoom made its way obviously in 2020. Really had impact with the whole work from home piece. And now they're obviously trying to pivot because I think by the end of the pandemic, their obviously annual income massively depleted because people didn't need Zoom quite as much as they once did.
Yeah, interesting. We'll see how it goes. I think I worry about Zoom. I think they're going to become a fading brand because as IT managers look at their spend, they'll go, why are we paying for Teams over here and Zoom over there? Because we're Microsoft-based anyway, so we're effectively paying twice. We as an organisation, and I know other UK universities have switched all of our telephones to Zoom. There are no physical telephones on desks anymore. They're all built into your mobile phone or your desktop. So then switching to Teams as well would be a sort of another consideration. So, yeah, I like Zoom as a platform, despite all the problems we had on this podcast with it. I think it's quite well put together. It's a better app, certainly, than the Teams app. The Teams app is the flakiest, crashiest, nastiest thing in the world.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. I like Teams, but it's interesting when I Teams with people at work and they're on their Windows device and they share their screen. They're like, I can't see anybody now. I'm just sharing my screen. I'm like, how's that a thing? Surely it's got a mechanism so you can see who you're presenting to. I find that really bizarre because it's very different on the iPad.
Yeah, I find it really odd that, for example, when we use Zoom, you could have however many users you want arranged in a grid, or you can have them side by side, or you can drag them yourself around where you want them to be, whereas Teams enforces it, so you're there, that's there, unless you put everybody in a stupid lecture theatre sort of feature sometimes. It's got some really odd choices.
Together mode, that is what that is called. I'm with you on this, I think. Interesting to see what Zoom's doing. Obviously, they need to pivot and do something because I guess the market for video conferencing is largely saturated. It's going to be low growth, and therefore this is now what they're trying to do.
Yeah, fair. Should we do 3 quick stories about the law?
Yes, let's do it.
I think we're going to need a logo for Litigation Watch, the amount of stories like this we talk about. So these are 3 almost antitrust stories, if not antitrust stories. So the first one, Microsoft is now being investigated by the Federal Trade Commission over antitrust concerns. The agency is looking at a Microsoft cloud and software licensing business, cybersecurity services, and AI offerings. That's pretty much the whole company, right?
It does feel like it. I don't think they mentioned Xbox though, so maybe the Xbox division's okay. But it does feel like this is the way. I guess this is also in line with the Google one that's ongoing, and we're obviously waiting for the ruling on that. But it does feel like big companies have got a real problem now when they get so big that they can be forced into a corner, I guess. And it's this whole thing. Do they need to do more self-regulation? But how do they know they're going to get it right if they split themselves up?
Microsoft have been here before.
That's true.
If any company should be watched very, very carefully, it's Microsoft. They have been judged to be a monopolist. They're almost certainly a monopolist again. Particularly in the corporate space, as very few people will say we're not using Windows, we're not using Windows Server, we're not using Office. It's a big deal, and the NHS couldn't operate without it. I suspect our university would struggle. Your organisation certainly would. So they're big, and they need to be held to account. So I'm fine with stuff like this. They should be investigated. They have got a dominant market position.
No, agreed. I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it as long as the outcome is beneficial to the end users. That's the question, isn't it?
What you would want is somebody else to be able to sell you licenses for something at a cheaper price, or a product that was functionally the same but 30% cheaper, or did something more. There should be true competition. We keep talking about Apple having competition. Competition works. Microsoft have none.
Yeah, I think they have a little bit in G Suite, I guess, but it's really at the lower end of the spectrum. Otherwise, you're correct. In the enterprise, they largely have none.
Yeah, and as an IT buyer, you wouldn't entertain it because you're embedded with Microsoft, and it affects this, and it integrates with Teams, and it does this, that, and the other thing. All those things need to be part of this.
Yeah, and as I've said before, it's not necessarily the cost of going onto a platform, it's the cost of leaving the platform. How do you pick up your data and go somewhere else if you want a new CRM or a new Teams client instead? Maybe you want to move to Zoom. How would you do that? And it's that exit cost, because none of them make it easy.
Yeah. Open source. Moving along, Apple also has an ongoing thing about anti-steering this time. So this is purchases in the App Store not being allowed to link to other things. We saw this back in the day with Netflix, weren't allowed to say they had a website where you could sign up, for example. So this is always keeping the activity of Apple's purchasing practices inside of the App Store. Well, now Brazil have ruled against them as well.
Yeah, not surprised by this. Surprised it's Brazil for some reason. I don't know. It's not a country we hear much about in this side of things, but it makes sense, doesn't it? I think there's going to be more and more of this.
Well, it's a big country. Lots of people live in Brazil.
That's fair.
I presume, and also has growing upper middle class, people who can afford iPhones and devices and to do things in the App Store. So I think this is quite a big deal. I'm glad that it's not just the EU and the US and the UK that you hear about these things, that other regulators are taking Apple to task as well. They have 20 days to comply with this anti-steering law, or they'll get daily fines of $43,000. It's not a lot to Apple, but if they don't fix it, they'll mount up.
Yeah, you're right. It's not a lot to Apple for a short period of time, but it will get to a big number quickly.
Yeah. There's a quote from Nick here that I like. It would look very silly to me if Apple continues to deal with these consistent findings in country after country after country after country in individualized ways instead of updating its rules globally. Very silly indeed. I agree.
Agreed. And interesting, every word country was mentioned 4 times. There a link obviously to an article explaining which country he's referring to.
Yeah. So I agree. Sort it out, Apple. Next story, featured in the Register this time. Google is facing a $7 billion UK class action lawsuit over search engine dominance. So $7 billion is a lot, even for Google.
That's a ridiculous amount of money, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But they are the most dominant. How many people use the word, I'll Google it? I'm probably one of the few that go it, but it's not quite as catchy, is it?
No, it's not. And there are other search engines available as well, but it is in the generic. It's what you do now. You Google things. And I think it's very hard for Google to argue that they haven't got that dominance.
Yeah, no, I'm just searching in my mind. I completely agree with you. Obviously, they've paid Apple for years to be the default. Microsoft have tried everything they can do to not get you to install Google as soon as you fire up Edge. But you're right, they massively are the dominant one. Even my kids, even though I steer them to DuckDuckGo, they want to Google it because their mates use Google.
Yeah, and much as I like DuckDuckGo, I think Google search is still better, even with the awful AI-generated search result that you get first these days.
I guess because I've used DuckDuckGo for so long, I've got no basis for comparison. I haven't gone out and reevaluated or done many comparison searches. I've been wedded to it for a long period now.
Yeah, I had DuckDuckGo as my default, but then when I reinstalled my Macs and got the new Mac Mini, I just left it as Google just to see what it was like, and the results are better.
But then maybe they've got their dominance, but maybe in fairness to Google, maybe they've actually earned their dominance.
Well, once upon a time, but the problem is the point of this is once you're dominant, you keep that dominance, and that's when you're a monopoly. It's fine to be the biggest as long as you're not keeping all the small people down. And Google has abused its dominance in search essentially, and it's done that through a number of commercial contracts that it has with Android device manufacturers and Apple to make it the default search engine. Not wrong.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. I would imagine though, if Google could save the 20 billion that they pay Apple, allow a search preference screen, and 80% of the population would still pick Google.
Yeah, they probably would, but that's not the point. They may be broken up very shortly in the United States based on the previous stories we've had. Certainly, Android might not be part of them anymore. Maybe search won't be. Maybe advertising gets spun off. Who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that one plays out. But this is huge.
This is huge. Something that's less huge, and that's the end of Litigation Watch, but made me sad. And I don't know if you remember Delicious Library.
I do remember Delicious Library, and I used to follow the developer Will Shipley. So he's a well-known developer in the Apple indie community. Used to work at Omni Group, who made Omni Focus, which was mentioned actually in your app listing. Really famous developer. Built an app called Delicious Library, which was for, back in the day, I mean, it does show its age now, for building a library of all your books and DVDs and CDs, all your media kind of thing.
It was really cool. It did it in a very Mac-like way as well. It presented you with... You initially needed a barcode scanner. Ultimately, you could use your iPhone as well. You'd scan the barcode, and it would build up that library, and it looked beautiful, like with cover arts and all the links, and almost like a Wikipedia for your media library, effectively, but arranged in a very Mac-like way. Yeah, I can understand why it's gone away, but it's sad that it has.
Yeah, so what's happened here? Well, a couple of things just to note, I think. One of the designers of Delicious Library that worked with Will Shipley, he then went on to Apple and did a lot of the interface, like on the first iPhone, where you're scrolling through your photos or your album art, that kind of thing. And so they took a lot from it. So it was quite influential. It's very skeuomorphic though, and obviously that style has died over the years. So it was an amazing app, really well done. And it used Amazon basically to download all the details about, the barcode of the Notting Hill Blu-ray that you've just scanned, for example. But Amazon have now turned that off, and therefore it's rendered Delicious Library non-functioning, I guess is the right word. But the developer works at Apple anyway, so I'm assuming this was just left there just to run, and wasn't really getting updated in the background.
I think it was Amazon killing off the URLs, or the API was the main part of this, wasn't it? That's the wrong link.
Yeah, it was definitely.
Yeah, so there we go. It's a bit sad. I think I've got strong nostalgia for Delicious Library. That's the right link.
But I do think this is a problem now, though, in that it's the end of Delicious Library, which is sad. But it was such a good app, and it looked so different, and it was cool, and it was just did it in a really good way. I think a problem we have with a lot of apps now is you open them up, they all look the same. All the toolbars are the same. All the the interfaces. I know they've got a scale for lots of different resolutions now, but everything just looks like the same app. It's really disappointing.
It's Apple's fault. We all, as developers, we put everything into a table view because it's an easy thing to implement, and you scroll the table view. That's what you do. Yeah,
but it's just really frustrating, though, isn't it? Apps don't really have identities anymore. They just have a color and some symbols from the app that Apple provides. You're not even building icons anymore, and it's the same with the new icons to a degree, where they're changing the backgrounds to be black. Everything's just starting to morph into the same, and it's really disappointing, I think.
I agree, and the death of skeuomorphism didn't help either. Which is the metaphor where things on your phone or your device look like they do in the real life. So your contacts app, for example, has a leather-bound look and all that kind of stuff. It all went away. Bit of a shame.
Do you reckon skeuomorphism will make a comeback?
Everything comes around again.
Yeah, so maybe 10 years from now, and hopefully we'll have the compute power to really do it some justice.
Yeah, you'll be able to smell and feel the leather as well in our new devices. In
Fantastic.
our VR world. Should we do a bit of media?
Yeah, let's do the media.
Tell us about Bake Off.
Oh, I love Bake Off. I watched it with my family. I thought this was Dylan's Bake Off to lose. And are we going to do spoilers?
I don't know if we should do spoilers.
Okay, we won't do spoilers.
We'll talk about the final three, but we won't do spoilers.
Okay, so no spoilers. So I was going into it. I really rated Dylan. I thought, great, the young kid. He just seemed to have a lot of skill, didn't he? But it was quite a tough watch because he did not have a good week, I think is what I'm going to say.
So there's spoilers right there. Well done.
No, I just said he had a tough week. I didn't say anything else.
I think he did have a tough week. I think that's fair to say. I thought the three finalists were deserving by the time they got there. I was very sad that they got rid of Nellie before it got to the final. I thought she was terrific.
She was quite a good character.
She was a great character and had a lot of stories to bring as well. So, but no, I think the three finalists deserved to be there. I was surprised but happy with the ultimate winner, and I really like Bake Off. I really do. I think it's a great, heartwarming show.
Do you know what I think summed it up is, as I've already mentioned, Dylan was having not a good week, but he asked one of the other bakers to help him. In what is in the final, he had help from another baker in the same competition, and I think that kind of sums up the atmosphere of it. I think usually everybody's happy, whoever wins, but they all seem to get along and help each other out, and I think that's quite a good metaphor for the show.
I think that's very true. I think the judging is good. Paul Hollywood can be a little... he has his favourites. I think it's fair to say Prue is a lot more even with the bakers, I think. And I think I said it a couple of weeks back, but Alison Hammond in this show has been just terrific.
She's a ray of sunshine, isn't she? The show messed with my mind because you've got Alison Hammond, massive ray of sunshine, and you've got Prue, also not a downbeat person, but she's in her 80s now. Like, fair play to her. So I think it's a great show. I love it.
It is. Something that's not so great, and we did touch on this last week, is Apple's relationship with Hollywood. So Apple TV released a movie with... George Clooney and Brad Pitt. It's called Wolves. You watched it, I think?
I did watch it.
I just thought it looked like straight-to-video Drek, so I didn't bother.
It was okay. Like, I longingly liked George Clooney, I think, and Brad Pitt together for Ocean's 11, their first film, not the subsequent ones, because I loved that film. It was so good, and it came out at a time when we were at university together.
It's a remake of a Brat Pat film with Frank Sinatra, though, right?
It is a remake, yeah. But it was just it was well done. It was a good film. Great chemistry, and then this one's quite different, but it's just a bit, I don't know, it was a bit disappointing to say the least. Maybe Apple knew that and hence why they pulled it.
Anyway, a brouhaha boiled up where Apple were going to do a sequel, and the director asked them not to talk about the sequel, and the director's quite a big deal. He directed the three most recent Spider-Man movies. He's a well-regarded Hollywood figure. His only request was Apple didn't mention about the sequel, and Apple went and mentioned about a sequel, so he said, I refuse to do that. So it seems that they're just falling out. It's not, as we would say, it's not a great look for Apple that they're fighting with an industry like this when they're trying to make waves in it. And we talked last week about them potentially licensing their movie content only, not TV content, to other streaming networks. But if they're not building good relationships with Hollywood, they're not going to have many movies that anybody else is going to want to pick up.
I do wonder whether they want to do Hollywood anymore. Maybe they've tried it and it's like, well, people aren't going to cinema as much. Is it worth all the effort? Should we just carry on streaming? I do wonder.
Yeah, I mean, it's a perfect storm because it's not a good film anyway.
It is disappointing, I must confess.
But everything I've seen about it, I mean, I don't have the IMDb, Rotten Tomato ratings to hand, but I just think this is a bad thing. It's not a great look for the actors who just took the payday. It's not a great look for Apple, who just sort of hung it out to dry. And the problem was they'd all been promised a cinematic release, and then Apple didn't give them the theatrical release. It went straight to streaming. So the director was cheesed off. The stars were cheesed off. All of them have left with a bad taste in their mouth for Apple. So I think Apple are to blame here fundamentally. Just because it's not very good doesn't mean you should not do the release that you'd promised all the talent involved.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Sorry, I just typed in Wolves, but I wrote Wolves, and I got a 13% Rotten Tomatoes. I got it wrong. It got 66% on Rotten Tomatoes and 50% on the Popcorner meter. So not a fantastic film, not the worst film ever. And I would agree. I think I would agree with those ratings. I think that's fair.
Yeah, so watchable if there's nothing better on.
Yeah, if it was on TV on a Saturday night and you weren't doing anything, it'd be right to watch.
So, of a similar rating, I'm going to talk about Dune Prophecy. So, Dune Prophecy is a new show on HBO. It is set 10,000 years before the Dune films, which is quite a period of time. It always amused me when you start watching the Dune films or read the Dune books about the year is 10191, and I'm like, wow, that's a long way in the future. This is set a very long way in the past, about the setting up of the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood, who are all the mysterious women in black who float around in the background. in the Dune films, but actually they're not floating around in the background. They've got a very firm grip on the sort of the affairs of everything that's going on around them. This is really well made. It looks fantastic. The acting in it is really good. I think the reviews of this are slightly mean. I got to say, I think 68% from critics and 59% from the audience are a bit harsh. There's only been 2 episodes so far. I've only watched the first one. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think the Dune universe is fantastic. They've obviously had some sort of relationship with Denis Villeneuve, who produced the 2 most recent films. The font's the same. The look is very similar. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was a bit thrown when I saw this. I was like, oh, right, we're having the Dune 3 film, are we, or something? And then I was like, oh, no, this is, because they've used, like you say, the similar font and that, it just completely threw me to begin with. It looks interesting. I haven't watched it yet because I still haven't watched the Dune 2 movie. So I'm a little bit behind. I think I need to go back and rewatch Dune 1 and then go and watch Dune 2 and then possibly go and watch this.
It's weird because it's Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2 as well. They're both just based on the first book.
Yeah, they retrospectively called the Dune first movie Part 1, didn't they? I think when they realised how good it was.
Great films, and I think this TV show should be given a chance. It's quite complicated and expects you to keep up, but I'm fine with that.
It does look good. Like I said, I love the Dune universe. My first foray into computer games was through Dune, so very fond of that story.
Do you want to tell us how fond you are of the film Major League?
So I've watched Major League at your insistence, and you just ruined Ted Lasso for me. So Major League is a film from the 80s, quite an interesting cast, to be fair. I think I messaged you in the week while I was watching it. I didn't realise the president from 24 is in it, and he's got a very distinctive voice. I think he's a great actor. So I've watched the film. It has ruined Ted Lasso because a lot of the plot points, general setup that's in Ted Lasso obviously came from this film Major League, which is a bit disappointing. I think I think Ted Lasso have obviously done it better. They've done it 30 years, I'm just checking my maths, 35 years later or something, so it's a lot more modern, but it's frustrating that they've lifted a lot of the original concept and ideas. So I don't know if I can go back and watch Ted Lasso in the same light that I probably would have done a week ago.
I mean, we stand on the shoulders of giants, don't we? I mean, this is it. The chances are you've been inspired by something else. And I thought Major League was a great 80s film, actually. Great cast, great script, very tight. Even if you don't know a lot about baseball, I think there was something there for you to enjoy. And picking up that you don't know a lot about the sport and getting on and doing it well is exactly what Ted Lasso did. I mean, Ted Lasso is not some amazing character. He was developed for an advert. So it's not entirely surprising that the inspirations of that come from something else.
Yeah, that's fair. And I said to you, I think they've taken Major League and the Ted Lasso advert, put it in a blender, and out came the Ted Lasso TV show. I think, though, it's just disappointing how much they had plagiarised, in my view. But I think the film's very good. I would definitely recommend watching it. It's just an enjoyable 80s film, as you say. It's good for baseball. I don't know a lot about baseball. I did enjoy it. But yeah, it should I think when I rewatch Ted Lasso, I'll rewatch it in a different way.
Sorry to spoil Ted Lasso for you. What about Inception?
Inception. So I went to London and I texted you and said, I'm watching Inception on the train. And as you pointed out, it's probably not the best film to watch on the train because you're not as fully immersed in it. But with my AirPods Pro 2 in, my dual tandem, whatever, OLED display on my iPad, I sat there and watched it. And do you know what? I watched half of it on the way there and the other half on the way back. It's fantastic. What a film. And I hadn't seen it for so long and I really concentrated on it. I didn't have anybody interrupting me, like my children or anybody asking for anything. Brilliant. Just such a good film. I felt like I'd spotted things I hadn't seen before, even though I've watched it a few times before, but just generally really enjoyed it. And actually a guy sat next to me on the train, just as he was getting off, he leant over and go, that film's amazing, because he was obviously he saw that I was watching it and loved it. So it was good. But just if you haven't seen it in a long time, it stands up really well. I would definitely recommend a rewatch.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's well done. It's a very interesting concept. I have a colleague at work who dismissed it because he says, "Well, it's just recursion."
That's fair.
Which is fair, but I think the music is very, very good. The visuals are impressive. The cast are excellent, and you can't ever knock the director really. So
that's fair, and I'm sure you're going to send me a film from the 80s that has done this already, and he's just leached the idea off it.
That's going to be my thing now, is it? Spoilers.
Spoilers, yeah. Rod Spoiler Middleton.
I hope not. Should we do some games?
Yeah, let's do some games.
So, first up, Sony's apparently working on a PS5 portable. Part of me, and it's years away from launch, Part of me goes, yay, that would be really cool to have my PlayStation 5 in my hand. But then I think on Sony's history of mobile gaming, and I think it's not going to go well, is it?
You're talking to somebody that had a PSP, so a PlayStation Portable, I don't know, back in the somewhere 2008-9 era, I'm guessing. I'm trying to remember myself. And I used to take this to work, and I used to game with my mates at lunch, and I loved it. We could do peer-to-peer networking, if I remember correctly, and do Wi-Fi games. They did a good stab at it. And obviously we've got stories of Microsoft doing something similar, haven't we? Is there going to be like an Xbox Portable? I do wonder though whether they should go, do you know what? We're going to do the desktop console. Microsoft and Sony do that. Nintendo, you've got your niche, you go and do that. And there's room for everybody to play in the same sandbox. I don't know if I need more devices. That's my concern. What do you think?
I think they've looked at the Steam Deck and how well it's done and gone, oh, I want a bit of that.
Maybe.
Basically.
And they are.
And
I worry, though, that they haven't got the games for it because I'm not really seeing the games on my PS5. There's not that many PS5 games. I thought I'd be playing way more games than I am. But there's just not that many coming out that I'm like, I want to get that.
that's because the big hitters, your Fortnites, your Call of Duties, your Roblox or whatever, are just sucking all the air out there.
That's fair. My son's playing Fortnite as we speak now. I'll play Gran Turismo a bit later, maybe. He's after FIFA for Christmas. FC 25 as it's now called, and maybe the Spider-Man 2 game. But there's just not many that we're craving, and I thought there'd be a lot more original content on the PS5. And I do worry if they did a portable, whether they'd have the same problem.
I mean, the games are there. You just need to go and look at Bilateral Plus and other sort of little indie titles that have come along. No, seriously, that have come along and sort of dominated the marketplace. And if you look at independent gaming on the PC, most of which you can play in your Steam Deck, there's plenty of games there for people to get their heads around. If you're a dedicated gamer, you'll find Baldur's Gate 3, you'll find Bilateral, you'll find Slay the Spire, you'll find whatever. It doesn't always need to be the Call of Duties, the tent poles that are doing it. Flight Simulator 2024 was released, as we talked about last week. It's having a terrible launch because of all the streaming things. So these little indie titles that look nice and shiny and on a console with a decent battery life, why not? Sony have got plenty of experience in building small handheld devices that can potentially work well. If they cut the power down, it doesn't need to be an 8K display, it doesn't need to be a 4K display. Look at the Steam Deck for what's possible in a portable device. Look at what Nintendo do with the Switch. It's not a high-powered device, but it's got decent enough battery life, and the games are there. And this kind of form factor is perfect for something like a card game or a Battler or Hades or one of these sort of smaller, more independent things. Why not?
I'm with you. I'm conceptually with you, and I do agree. There's a lot of games out there. I just haven't seen the thing that I really want to go and get. And I thought I would have had more of that on the PS5.
One thing Steam have got a lot of is games. You can go now and enjoy their autumn sale should you choose to. I'm a lot less excited about sales than I used to be. I used to be a big deal when the Steam sale came along, and these days I'm like, sale.
I think because there's so many sales on, a lot more constant in the year, and you're probably like some friends of mine who have bought so many games on the sale that you never get around to playing them all. So I can kind of see that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean there are some quite decent deals here. I think that if I scroll back through, Civilization 6, for example, is available for £4.99, and that's a hell of a deal if you don't already have it.
8-year-old game though, and the new one's coming out in February.
Yeah, but it's a $5, Chris, for the deepest game of all time, maybe. So you could play all of history in it. You can't go wrong with £5 for that.
That is fair. It is a good game, and if you want to get into a bit of Civ before the next one, that's good. And Baldur's Gate 3, as you're showing now, that's £40. That's 20% off already. That's a relatively new game, and it looks great.
Yeah, I bought this last Christmas. It's a very, very deep game. It's too deep for me, really. I haven't got the time to expend on it, but it's really impressive technical achievement. And, of course, works on the Mac, so, it's a good recommendation.
That is good. And I've put a link in the show notes to one that I'm interested in, and it's called Satisfactory. I've seen some screen grabs of this on Mastodon, and I think the game's about £25 or something, and you build factories and stuff. And I don't know, I just fancy something a bit different. It's got great reviews. It's not a huge amount of money. So I'm a little tempted to check out something like this. And I haven't bought a modern sort of sim game in a long time, so I might well pick up this before the sale ends. And it only came out in September, so it's a very recent game.
Yeah, it was in beta for a very long time. You're able to get it as sort of an early release thing. It has been very well reviewed. They've tuned the mechanic quite well. There's a few games of this sort of genre appearing. Dyson Sphere is another one where you sort of can build on a universe level, factories and systems and all the rest of it. And yeah, this is a well reviewed game. Rock Paper Shotgun have a very good overview of what it is and how you go through it and all the rest of it, which if you remind me I'll put in the show notes. But yeah, I can understand why. I think it's reasonably intensive on your computer, so have a decent graphics card.
That's my slight concern. I've got two very outdated graphics cards, but it may just be the kick I need to actually just go and get a proper graphics card and sell my other ones.
They're saying a GTX 1650 or better. It's got to be the spec for this.
I don't know what that means.
It's a graphics card from about 5 years ago.
I might just get the game, try it, and then if it doesn't work, I will go and get my graphics card sorted out in the January sales.
It's only 26 quid. What could go wrong?
Well, it's not a huge amount of money, and it looks good, and I want to support people that do good games. I've popped the rock paper shotgun link in the show notes for us as well.
Fair enough. A game that you can get for nothing, at least if you're an Apple Plus subscriber. You always forget what the subscription's called. The big subscription that gives you Apple Arcade as well is Crossword Jam Plus. They call it brain game puzzles for adults. It's just something that's distracted me when I've been stood in queues for the last week or whatever. It's right up your street, Chris. It's very simple. All you've got to do is spell words in a crossword. No thought involved particularly. If your spelling is decent, it's all right, but it's quite good fun. And I've enjoyed it. It tells you what percentage of players have solved the puzzle that you're on. I've got it as far that only 19% of players have solved the puzzles I'm doing at the moment, so I'm very pleased with myself for having got that far. I want to get it to 10% and I'll probably throw it away, but it's there. You don't need to think about it very hard. It's even simpler than Balatro.
I wish I could spell. As you know, I'm not a fantastic speller, but maybe I should check this out. I think my wife would enjoy this. She's an amazing speller, so I will take a look.
Well, it has got 3-letter words in it like sit and raw and rad. You should be able to cope.
Yeah, that's more definitely up my street. I'm just an atrocious speller. Even if the letters are in front of me, I struggle to get them in the right order. It's just my brain just doesn't work that way. I'm more of a numbers person.
Shall we do a main show?
Let's do the main show, and it's going to be about you this week.
It's going to be about me. So I'll try. We've only got a short amount of time to talk about this, so I just wanted to give an idea of all the bits that go into producing and editing the podcast, really. So we've talked about them individually, but just to bring it together to finish the story for those that are interested. So what we do to talk to each other is we use FaceTime. For a long time we used Zoom, and we have tried other things as well, all of which let us down really badly. But most recently, FaceTime has actually worked quite well, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, definitely. It just seems to work, to be fair to it. It just provides us that way so we can look at each other. We don't record from it, but I can see you, you can see me. So hopefully we can time when we're going to jump in and say things.
Yeah, and we can share the screen, which is how we do the video as well. I share a web browser with Chris. Chris can see what's going on with it. We've talked about this in the show, but as I say, this is to bring it together. So FaceTime works quite well. We stopped using Zoom because it introduced this weird sort of every 45 seconds to 50 seconds gap in the audio, which was becoming increasingly upsetting over time. We never got to the bottom of it. For a long time, it was on Chris's end, then it was on mine. But anyway, here we are. So we talk to each other with this, and then both of us record our individual audio. For a while, I had a very clever workflow that would record both ends, but I can't make that work with FaceTime. So what we do now is using Audio Hijack Pro, we just record our microphones directly to, WAV files, mono, not stereo, WAV files, at a particular bit rate, recorded directly to the SSDs in our computers. And that works quite well. Audio Hijack Pro is a very clever app. It's probably more clever than me, that lets you build various blocks to get the audio to where you want it. And that works quite well as well, I would say.
Yeah, I bought Audio Hijack as well. I think I did get it in a sale. It's a fantastic app. The only thing I would say to new users of it is you probably need to watch like a video on it, because to start with, it's not obvious how it works. But once you get it, it's incredibly clever and very flexible, to be fair to them. It's an amazing piece of design and a proper modern day Mac app, as we were just talking about the lack of modern Macs looking different and having cool interfaces. They've nailed it on this one, I would say.
Yeah, and it lets you recapture any piece of audio on your Mac and doesn't seem to interfere with very much, so it's a very good app. However, if you're starting a podcast, you don't need Audio Hijack Pro. You could do this with lots of free apps. You could do it, and Audacity is the one I'm thinking of. Audacity, which actually will record a waveform and let you edit and do sorts of stuff directly into the application itself, and it does a good enough job. In fact, I think, Chris, you used that right at the start.
I did use that at the start. It was fantastic just to get us up and running. I went for Audio Hijack just because it was nice to support them, and it is just such a good app.
So at the end of the recording process, Chris sends me, I'm going to stick to the audio for the moment, Chris sends me his audio he's recorded to his Mac, I take out the audio I've got on my Mac, and I put it into Logic Pro. Logic Pro is an app from Apple. It's been recently updated. If you have it on an iPad, it costs you a monthly subscription, but when I got it, getting on for 8 years ago now, I got a bundle with Logic Pro and Final Cut Pro in it. It was a one-time fee of 299 quid, and I've been able to use it ever since, even up to the latest version, which I think is 11, is the latest version of Logic Pro. It is far, 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 far more than what you need to do to edit a podcast. And again, Audacity will let you do this just as well, but I take the stream that Chris sends me, the stream that I create, and I put the top and tail of the show together with some media stings and the music, and I do some very basic editing to bring it together.
Looking at the screenshot in the webpage that you're sharing has just put me right off of Logic because it just looks so complicated to my eyes. This is a skill I do not have.
I'm not editing, music, and the screenshot for those watching the video is somebody bringing together all the instruments, which is what it's designed for. It's a studio level application in which you can have guitars and vocals and backing and isolated bass tracks, and you can do all manner of clever things, all of which terrify me. There's so many little shortcuts and things within Logic to mess you up that you can change the screen as you go along that I stick very clearly to the thing that I do. Frankly, I probably should use Audacity, but I quite like the way Logic brings it together, and the editing in it is quite simple for a couple of tracks. I'm sure an expert would laugh at the way that I do things. I was tempted when we were having the discussion to sort of show you how I edit sort of in real time, but it wouldn't be great for the podcast listeners. Might be a good bonus video if anybody's interested on YouTube. But for the 4 tracks I work with as I go through it, it works fine. I can cut you out, I can boost levels, I can do all that kind of stuff. Chris often comes over quite quiet. So there's things I can do within it to sort of make it sound a little bit better.
Yeah.
I haven't spent any...
Sorry, I was just going to say it's probably one of those things that once you've got your workflow, you know what you're doing. It probably takes you a while just to get set, and then once you're set, you just go do, and you're off to the races.
Yeah, unless it's one of those shows where both of us are coughing, or there's planes flying over, or there's lots of noise that are introduced to it more often by us than anything external, then I'm relatively quick at doing it. And then it lets me do things like put in chapter markers, which for those of you that listen to the podcast and you want to see the album art change over time, the initial part of that is done in Logic Pro. So you put chapter markers in for the various parts of it, and it lets you put those in. So that's about as much as I could do in Logic Pro. And I don't have any plugins or anything that I put in. So Mark Warment, I know, has spent a lot of money on Logic plugins that will reduce outside noise or will boost particular levels and do things, and I haven't bothered with any of that. I just stick with the app as is.
Fair enough.
So, having edited the podcast, the next step, and I've got my links, is to put it into something called Mac Whisper. So this is a relatively new thing. I used to use, I can't even remember what it was called, something script that would give me a text transcript of the audio that we did, so I could identify those chapter markers more easily. I also use it for looking for the title of the show as well. If we've said something funny that I've missed over time, I can see the text as I scroll through it. So what this does is I feed the generated MP3 into Mac Whisper. It will give me a live transcript of what we've said, and I can find the news and the various sections so I can get the chapter markers timed correctly within Logic Pro. That's all I use it for, but it's a great little app. I just bought it in the Pro version of the Black Friday sale. It is free, but I spent 27 quid, I think, to buy the Pro version to chuck the developer a little bit of money.
And it is nice to do that, to support a developer, I think, from time to time like that. It sounds like a great app.
It's a really good app. So it's 40% off at the moment in the Black Friday sale, and it will transcribe. The Pro version will transcribe anything. The free one will do mostly audio, but you can speak straight into it and it will do the transcription. You could feed a film that you had that didn't have subtitles, for example. It can generate subtitle files for Jellyfin and other programs like that. It's a really well done thing. And the Pro version, at least, you can run it with an LLM running on your own computer. So if you use LM Studio and have one of those open source models, you can actually feed it into that rather than going to the internet as well. So you can do everything locally if you don't trust OpenAI or wherever the audio goes off to.
Wow, it's quite a cool app.
It's a very cool app, and it's very Mac-like. You just drag and drop files into it.
Cool.
So, having got the audio and got all the time codes and everything I needed to produce the MP3, I then use Marco Arment's free tool. It's not open source, but free tool called Forecast to generate the album art and the timings for it to become something that can upload and turn into a podcast that ends up on your device. It's fairly straightforward. You can drag a file into it. It's very, very quick. Fair play to Marco. He knows his audio stuff. And you can do things like put in the titles, series numbers, get the exact timing of it, every chapter art within that, and I keep thinking we need to get a couple of new bits of chapter art for our legal sections and all the rest of it, but it lets me generate the final MP3 once that comes back out of Logic to be uploaded.
Yeah, that's quite cool and very simple app. I do like podcasts with chapters in it because often I just have a glance, see what's coming up, and then, if something's not quite for me, I will skip it.
It is one of those things when I was thinking of moving to Linux that I would have struggled with because I have no idea how to do the chapter art without Forecast.
Yeah, I would assume there's something out there, but I would assume the podcasting space on Linux is a bit smaller than on the Mac.
I don't know. People do it all the time, so there must be a way. But at the same time, maybe only Apple-supported podcast players support the album art. I don't know enough.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's the audio. That gets uploaded to our CMS. The CMS federates it out to Apple. There's a bunch of slightly complicated stuff, but basically all podcasts are RSS, and they're really simple syndication. They go out, they get advertised by Apple and Spotify, and I think it's on YouTube Music as well. And as soon as it's available, it becomes available to you to download in your podcast player of choice.
Yeah, that bit is quite clever that you upload it once and it just goes off around the world into all these different ways of listening.
Yeah. So in terms of money, I've paid for Logic Pro once upon a time, and I've now paid for Mac Whisper, but hadn't up to that point. But all of these products are free to get to this point, which is quite cool.
Yeah, that is quite cool. There's a lot you can do with very little money.
Yep. The other, maintaining the very little money, is the video portion of this. So I edit the video in something called DaVinci Resolve. I do have Final Cut Pro, so I could be doing this in Final Cut Pro, but I found it was so inefficient rendering the video that I was running out of space on my M3 MacBook Pro. So I stopped using Final Cut Pro because it was badly made. I guess that's not fair. If you've got lots of space, what it does is it renders all the video as you're editing it, so it takes up a lot of hard disk space, so it looks fantastic when you're scrubbing the timeline to watch the video. But I just didn't have enough space on the device I had, so Final Cut Pro is not badly made. Final Cut Pro is an excellent product, but you need the hardware to support it.
Yeah, you need the bigger drives that Apple don't sell you generally.
That they want you to spend 4 terabyte on an internal drive. So I use DaVinci Resolve, currently version 19. There are 2 versions of DaVinci Resolve. There is the free one, which gives you almost everything, and there's a pro version, which again is about 300 quid. That adds a couple of bits and pieces in terms of plugins and things like that. If you're a Linux user, and this is important, DaVinci Resolve is cross-platform. It's Linux, it's Windows, and it's Mac, which is really impressive. The free version and the paid version. It gives you a few more codecs, so you can actually edit some types of video that you can't in others.
That is impressive that it's available across all.
Yeah, it's a really good app. It's very fast, and increasingly with the nonsense that Adobe is doing, as we've talked about before, I'm seeing lots of editors and YouTubers move to DaVinci Resolve. And if you look at the shots that are on the screen at the moment, very big Hollywood movies are edited using DaVinci Resolve. It's a properly professional product.
Yeah, they've got a great testimonial video here, haven't they, of all these things that are made on it. It's really impressive.
Yeah, it's a really good app, and the color correction in it is second to none. Not that I use it much for the podcast because I always look a bit yellow, but the various components of DaVinci Resolve are seriously impressive. Even the audio editing is called Fairlight. It also works incredibly well. I'm very impressed with DaVinci Resolve, and every time I use it, I can't believe it's a free product.
Yeah, and what's got me is this video that is on their homepage. I'm waiting for it to loop back round to the start, but they just seem to keep pulling more clips out of different films. It's impressive.
Yeah. It's really good. The last bit is how we get that video into DaVinci Resolve, and we use a thing called OBS Studio on my end. OBS is open source. It's open broadcaster system. It's designed for streaming, so for Twitch gamers and people who do live YouTube streams and all the rest of it. And it's a very clever app that will record audio, but any part of your screen as well. So you can actually put transitions into it, titles, lower thirds live while you're doing it, none of which I use because I just want to record my screen as we're talking about it. So as we scroll, it appears in the video. It does capture the audio as well. I have occasionally used the audio instead of what comes out of Audio Hijack. So potentially you record most of the podcast with this. When we tried it, doing both ends on my M3 MacBook Pro, it lagged like hell. So for the moment, we're just sticking to what at the moment is a working workflow for us. But that's how we get the video in, and then that gets edited into DaVinci Resolve as one of 4 video streams. So there's yours, there's mine, there's interstitial bits, and then there's the OBS stream that comes in, and I edit them all within that. The whole editing process, audio, probably takes me about 15 minutes. The video probably takes me about 45. And then that gets uploaded to YouTube at the end of it, and I keep an archive on my NAS as well.
Wow. It's quite fair play. You do quite a lot in your end. Rod does all the work, by the way, to everybody out there. He's got a really good workflow set up for doing this.
I don't know if it's good, and a professional editor would laugh me out of the room. It'd probably take a professional editor about 30 seconds to do everything I painstakingly do. There's a YouTube channel called Dog, which is worth a look, about how he edits a 30-second YouTube clip in Premiere Pro and in DaVinci Resolve, and the work he goes into to make it happen is really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff that you're doing, though, just blows my mind, because it's something I've never had an interest in or an inkling to fiddle with, whereas you've got it. And it's like when you see things like time-lapse videos of how people make a painting or edit a video, it just blows my mind how it starts off with the raw materials at one end and comes out polished at the other end. And I think you do an amazing job with it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And that's all I got for a main show. Any questions about any of that?
Are you happy with the workflow? It feels like you've honed it now, and we've had some good weeks where I think we've had quite a reliable get going, because we did have a few with Zoom playing up and what have you, but it feels like we've got to a good place.
I was getting very upset about the quality of the audio, particularly. I think we're almost there. There's little bits of tweaks and things that I think we could do, but I'm pretty happy with it at the moment. It's not keeping me awake at night how we're sounding, and I think we look okay on the YouTube as well.
Yeah, I think it's come together really well, and we try and do it in one take, don't we? We try to not have so much editing. Occasionally, I leave my heater on, a bomber flies over, I sneezed earlier. You know, those kinds of things do happen, but we try our best not to let it get in the way.
And I occasionally forget to take them out of the edit as well. So, we're only human, everybody. We're not professional podcasters. Both Chris and I have full-time jobs, more than full-time jobs sometimes. And, in Chris's case, particularly, a young family to look after. So we do our best for you.
Yeah, I'm hoping as they grow up, I'll have more time.
There we go. App of the week?
Yeah, let's do it. What's your app of the week?
So my app of the week is a bit of open source. I'm into my open source at the moment, as you can probably tell. NAS hardware, network attached storage software, called TrueNAS Scale. So I run this on the box that I built last year. You can go back and find the episode of that. Maybe if I'm sufficiently motivated, I'll do it in the podcast. But I've got an old Dell workstation that's full of hard disks, 10 terabyte hard disks, one of which just broke on me. That runs this open source operating system that will do storage, so you can serve up Samba, so Windows compatible storage containers or NFS shares. It has a very nice front end to it where it will give you the status of your drives. It runs an app, a suite underneath it called ZFS, which is very secure file storage. It monitors it all the time. It keeps shadow copies. It does versioning. It does all manner of clever things. It lets me do backups of my Mac. It lets me keep storage of this podcast. And crucially, it'll warn me when hard disks are about to fail, which is what happened. It said, this disk is becoming degraded. It told me exactly which one it was. I swapped it out. It resilvered a 10 terabyte disk in about 3 hours.
That's pretty good.
Really great. Rock solid. And it will also let you run Docker containers or virtualize on there as well, which I don't really do. But what I wanted to do is be an 100% always on, fail redundant. It's not, the RAID is not a backup, but it gives me enough backup within that. So now I have 2 NASs, one backs up to the other, and I can run one for this podcast, the Jellyfin server, all my internal stuff in one place. And I'm increasingly impressed with how good TrueNAS Scale is for a free piece of software.
It does blow my mind what you can get out there for next to nothing, and people invest effort in building this, making it, maintaining it. It's just amazing what does get given back, I guess is the right word.
Yeah, it's really quite, and there are a few of these things. There's Unraid, there's TrueNAS, there's Open Media Vault, and others. But it's very, very straightforward to see what's going on in terms of memory usage, how much space you're taking up to create pools and use shares, any issues that I've got. The 10 terabyte disk I put in was a very slightly different, I think it was 10.91 instead of 10.92, and I've got a slight warning about that. I've got mixed disk capacities, but I'm not worried about it. It gives me disk health warnings, it let me run scrub. It's a very fantastic, I'm just continually impressed with the application. So,
and as you're showing, it looks an amazingly polished app. And I'm sure that there's commercial tiers where people buy this, but the fact they give it away for people to get their foot in the door is amazing.
Yep. There you go. TrueNAS Scale. Thing of the week.
So thing of the week, I wrote surprise in our show notes. So we talked a little bit about Black Friday. I've just put a link in. I've actually gone and purchased a Mac Mini as part of the Black Friday sales because I said to you I was having a bit of FOMO. So I've gone and bought a Mac Mini, very similar to one you've ordered. I've got a Mac Mini Pro coming at some point. I bought it actually from KRCS. They had 10% off, and I thought 10% off seems pretty good. Apple did nothing, but I couldn't get it on something like Amazon because Amazon don't let you do a custom order. But if you go on to KRCS's, you'll show, now they're not sponsored, got no affiliation with them. They've got some money off the Mac Mini, so I configured one there. Gone for a very similar spec to you. I've got, I think, 24 gig of RAM. I've got the faster Ethernet, but I did go for a 2 terabyte hard drive because I thought my current Mac Mini I've had for about 4 years. I think if I'm going to keep this for a long period of time, I want a load of storage in it. And so I have spec'd it up a little bit. Don't show me the pricings because I don't want to see it. But they also do a scheme where if you spend over £1,000 with Klarna, you can pay 0% interest over the 12-month period. So I've done that just to space out the payments because I didn't really want to commit a huge amount of money at the moment. So yeah, I've spec'd it up. It's coming to me at some point. But hopefully we'll make uploading to the show a bit quicker. I'm going to put it on my Mac Studio display that I've got just here and set it up and have a proper Mac down here because I want to do a bit more coding and a bit more playing around with things. So that's what I've gone for. And I can resell my Mac Mini for a couple of £100, which again gives me a bit more saving towards this. So yeah, really happy with that.
Did you go for 10 gigabit Ethernet?
I did.
Correct choice. You'll have to get yourself some 2.5 gig around the place now.
Well, that's what I want to do at some point. I want to upgrade the Ethernet across the house. I'm laying the cables for it, and then I need to buy some switches and some APs and things. But I can do that over time. But again, this is something I'll probably keep for a long period of time, I think, because the Mac Minis do last quite well. And we're seeing with the Apple Silicon chips they're really good. So I have plumped for that. So there you go.
Good choice. I might pick you up on that next week. I think we can call that a show, Chris.
It's not going to be here for about 3 weeks there. I'm massively back ordered. But I'm in no rush, so I just thought I'd bite the bullet and I'd order it.
Fair enough.
Right, if anybody wants to get in contact with us, I see, Rod, you've updated our contact here. So you can get in contact with Rod on Mastodon, and he's at G5Maniac at mastodon.scot. Or you can get him on Blue Sky, and he is at G5Maniac at bsky.social. Or you can contact me on Mastodon. I am at _CJP at mastodon.social. You can watch on YouTube by going to our website and clicking on the link. Or you can drop us an email at wakefromsleep@protonmail.com.
Talk to you next week, Chris.
Cheers, Rod.